In order to achieve one's objectives, one must create enough trouble in order to reach the ultimate goal. I think we have some trouble brewing. I think it's been brewing for a long time. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for it because there is an objective. There's a goal in mind. Let's take a look at where this came from and how it works. Well, there was a German by the name of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He was born in Germany in 1770, died in 1831. Interesting, those dates. The American Revolution, the Constitution, the rise of the birth of Ellen White, the beginning of the Millerite preaching by William Miller just a few short years after Hegel died. So we see a philosophy of history. He was a German philosopher who left for us a philosophy of history that is used heavily today. It's known as the Hegelian dialectic, or order comes from chaos. Hegel's ideas are also known as the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. Now, what Hegel had in mind with the thesis and antithesis was you set up two opposing factions. And within those two factions, you control both sides of it, and you pit them against each other. And when things get bad enough and riled up enough and chaotic and confused enough, then you bring forth your synthesis or your solution. Now, that's what Hegel proposed, and that's what people have been using ever since Hegel figured that out. Now, how the process has been used is quite apparent in our world, and it's being used today to create a climate for a Sunday law. Because ultimately, friends, within the great controversy, within the framework of Revelation chapters 13, 14, 17, and 18, the ultimate prize for the papacy, Daniel chapter 11 clearly brings it out as well in those last few verses. Clearly, the ultimate prize is the destruction of God's law, and especially the one commandment that reveals God as our Creator, and that is the seventh-day Sabbath. So that is the ultimate prize. That is the final synthesis that the powers of this world are heading towards. Hegel's ideas are very simple. You have an objective, something you want to accomplish. The way to achieve it is to create trouble bad enough so that people will start looking for a solution. And when the troubles get bad enough, then you start offering the solution that you had in mind all along. Thus, you get what you want, and the people have no idea that was what you wanted in the first place. No idea. The people are the pawns. We're the pawns, friends. Or, as they say, we are the goyim. We are the human cattle. We just simply follow the cow in front of us. We do exactly as we're told, and rest is history. Moving exactly the way planned by the mastermind. And we're going to see in a few different instances how this worked within the last 100 years? Cody, go ahead.
It's actually very ingenious.
Oh.
It's ingenious because throughout time in history, we've seen different nations conquer each other. And the people didn't want to be conquered. So eventually, at some point, maybe a couple hundred years from then, perhaps, there's some type of overturning of that because they didn't win the hearts and minds of the people. With this system, you dupe the people into thinking it's their idea. You offer this, well, what about this? Yes, let's do that. So it looks like it's a grassroots movement. It comes from the people. It's the will of the people, and the leaders are merely carrying it out. When in fact, it's top-down. It's a top-down solution that comes right from Rome.
Absolutely, Cody. Great point. And in fact, Cody, and to make it very clear, as you just said, and I want to re-emphasize, this is the papacy's efforts to regain control of this planet one last time. That's what it is. Yeah. Paul, go ahead.
Well, as I hear you talking, one thing pops into mind, and that's Revelation 12. And outlined in that chapter, and it's only 17 verses, is the battle plan of each side. And this is the master battle plan of Lucifer and his forces.
Absolutely.
However, what Christians miss is in Revelation 12, it describes the remnant warriors, those who keep the commandments of God and have the spirit of prophecy.
Absolutely.
So Revelation 12, while it's a short chapter in the Bible, need be understood clearly. And you know, Bill, when you do, a lot of this falls right into place. It's a battle plan.
Absolutely.
God has one, Michael has one, and Lucifer has one. This is his.
Absolutely, Paul. Absolutely. Let's watch how it works. We're going to look at about 4 different times in history when this was used. Well within the last 100 years or less. Adolf Hitler, he wanted to destroy constitutional liberty in Germany. Well, how'd he do it? Well, he was the Third Reich, and Hitler wanted absolute power. He wanted absolute control. He wanted to do away with guns. He wanted to do away with all liberty in Germany. So what he did was he said the great enemy that needs to be destroyed in Germany was communism. So what did Hitler do? Well, he created a terrible scene when the Reichstag, which was like the congressional building in Washington, D.C., Hitler created the Reichstag fire. He blamed the communists, and the next day, liberties in Germany were destroyed. He removed them all the next day. Notice, the day following the fire, February 28, 1933, Hitler prevailed on President Hindenburg to sign a decree for the protection of the people and the state. Now, this was Hitler's protection for the German people from the communists because they were the enemy. He suspended 7 sections of the German Constitution which guaranteed individual and civil liberties. There you go. Described as a defensive measure against communist acts of violence endangering the state, the decree laid down that restrictions on personal liberty, on the right of free expression of opinion, including freedom of the press, the rights of assembly and association, violations of the privacy of postal, telegraphic, and phone communications, and warrants for house searches, orders for confiscations, as well as restrictions on property, were also permissible beyond the legal limits otherwise prescribed. This was Hitler's solution. In order for him to gain power in Germany, he had to take away people's liberty. And so he staged the Reichstag fire to get his synthesis. That's what he did, friends. 1933. Hitler did it. We're going to go up about 20 years to South Vietnam. No Dung Diem, the rabid Roman Catholic leader in South Vietnam. This quote is taken from Vietnam, Why Did We Go? By Avro Manhattan, page 77. Notice what it says. The next year, October 26, 1956, Diem promulgated a new constitution. Imitating Mussolini, Hitler, and also Ante-Pavelic of Catholic Croatia, not to mention Franco of Spain, Salazar of Portugal, he inserted an article which gave him full dictatorial powers. The article read in part as follows. During the first legislative term, the President, Diem, may decree a temporary suspension of, then followed almost all the civil liberties of the nation to meet the legitimate demands of public security. The article should have expired April of 1961, but it was maintained indefinitely. Who did Diem use? Well, Diem was a rabid Catholic. Diem blamed everything in South Vietnam. He blamed it on the communists. And so he's constantly focusing, and he's saying the communists, the socialists, they're so bad, they're so bad. So in order to protect everyone, I'm going to have to take away your freedoms. And in so doing, rabid Roman Catholic No Dung Diem took absolute power in South Vietnam. Now, he did that in 1956. So Hitler did it, and of course Adolf Hitler was put into power in Germany by the Catholic Zentrum Party. And the primary spokesperson for the Catholic Zentrum Party was Franz von Papen. And Franz von Papen was the man who pushed Hitler into power through the Catholic Zentrum Party. So Hitler used the Hegelian dialectic in the 1930s. Diem used it in the 1950s. Same philosophy. And in both cases, they pointed out a bad guy so that they could then take away the people's liberties. Does that sound familiar to you? Cody.
I just want to say on a side note, too, the Catholic Zentrum Party, after they fragmented after the Nazis, they formed something called the Christian Democratic Union. And the leader at one point and member of the Christian Democratic Union is the Chancellor of Germany right now, Angela Merkel. So it's very interesting that even though these powers supposedly gave up power to the Nazis and helped them and assisted them, they maintained that power right up into this day. The Christian Democratic Union, led by Angela Merkel, she's the Chancellor of Germany right now.
And that was instituted, Cody, after the Zentrum Party fell away.
They changed their name.
They changed the name. And the head of that now is Merkel. Very interesting. Completely, as Revelation 17 brings out, the kings of the earth are following the bidding of the great whore, the papal power. Paul, go ahead.
One thing you never hear about in Nazi Germany in 1939 and Actually, it was formed in 38 and 37, Einsatzgruppen. Look it up. 4 battalions that were put together by Himmler, by the SS, that were led, each battalion, by a very highly educated PhD in most cases. One of the commanders had 2 PhDs. They called him the Doc. He sent them, Himmler, out into Europe, Lithuania, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, to undermine the governments and to take the local people and turn them against their own people and had them murder them in the streets. This was all part of that. You never hear about this. Look it up. In Lithuania, in one, I think it was 4-month period, they killed 67,000 of their own people in one city. And this is all part of this. And these men were highly educated, PhDs, and they were all idealistic, which is what we have.
Sure.
And that's what's going on now in American society. They have the exact same thing going on. Antifa, this group, they're Einsatzgruppen. Look it up. It will chill your blood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Hitler, in order to destroy liberty, blamed everything on another group. In Hitler's case, it was communism, socialism. That's what Hitler blamed everything on. And as the people's attention is focused on how bad socialism or communism was, Adolf Hitler then said, we've got to take away all these freedoms. Diem did the same thing. The focus was on the communists. And while the people were focusing on communism, their liberties were swept away. And that was all part of the program, friends. Now the exact same thing is going on now. We have everybody focusing on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump and anybody that follows him they're the bad guy. Well, let's watch and see what happens going forward, friends, because the Hegelian dialectic is being played out right before our eyes today. Now, the Murrah Building in Oklahoma City, this was back in 1995, April of 1995. Of course, in the aftermath of the Murrah Building and its bombing, it was blamed on some right-wing weirdos like Timothy McVeigh and a man named Nichols. And so they became the focus of this horrific bombing at the Murrah Building. And while everybody was focused on the Murrah Building and the devastation and the deaths of people, well, Bill Clinton, the Jesuit-trained president from Georgetown University, decided to pass an anti-terrorism legislation which seriously gutted individual freedom. Jesuit-trained and educated Bill Clinton was told to get some anti-terrorism legislation through Congress. The legislation would seriously gut individual freedom in America, and here comes George Frederick Hegel once more. The thesis, well, the thesis was you have the good guys, the president and the Congress. The antithesis were the right-wing weirdos. And while everybody's focused and sad, the plan was to pass legislation that would gut liberty in America. That was in 1995. So, did it happen? Well, the Orlando Sentinel, April 29, 1995, it says the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act was on a slow track in Congress, the subject of a lively debate as to whether it would violate some fundamental civil liberties, including the right to confront one's accuser. After the Oklahoma City bombing, there are few sure legislative bets in Washington. Democrats and Republicans issued news releases Thursday calling for the bill's quick passage. That's Terror in the Heartland, Orlando Sentinel, April 21, 1995. So, terror was created. You say, well, it was all on Timothy McVeigh and Larry Nichols. No, it wasn't, friend. No, it wasn't. Benton K. Parton, an explosives expert in the American military for over 3 decades. Benton K. Parton declared that the ammonium nitrate bomb that was in McVeigh's U-Haul truck out at the street could never have done this kind of damage. That was impossible. Benton K. Parton said, in order to do this damage, there had to be bombs that were placed within the Murrah building. And friend, that's what caused this damage. Benton K. Parton, an explosives expert, said that, which then means that the federal government of the United States, Bill Clinton and his cronies, they did this in order to pass their anti-terrorism legislation. Just as Hitler did the exact same thing in the Reichstag fire of 1933. They create the problem and then give us the solution. This is from The Secret Terrorist, Chapter 10. One of the laws considered for passage after the Oklahoma City bombing was the gross destruction of the First Amendment advocated in Charles Schumer's bill, H.R. 2580. By the way, Charles Schumer is still a senator today. In this bill, a 5-year prison sentence would be given for publicly engaging in unseemly speculation and publishing or transmitting by wire or electronic means baseless conspiracy theories regarding the federal government of the United States. Well, the question we would have to ask ourselves is it a baseless conspiracy theory concerning the government's involvement in the bombing of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City in 1995? Is that a baseless conspiracy theory? Well, if we say that Benton K. Parton, who was an explosives expert for over 3 decades, if we're saying that now he is crazy and a full-blown fool, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, well, then I think you would be safe to say it is a baseless conspiracy theory. But friends, Benton K. Parton had over 30 years of experience. And Benton K. Parton said that it was impossible for the McVeigh bomb in the U-Haul truck to do that damage. That's what Benton K. Parton said. And he is an expert on explosives. That's not a baseless conspiracy theory. That's a fact. That's a fact. Paul?
Yeah, he was a retired admiral.
Yes,
He wasn't just an explosives expert, he was the world's foremost leading expert on demolition by explosives. Yeah, he was a U.S. admiral.
Benton K. Parton, if you've listened to him or read any material from him, that man had all his P's and Q's together. Cody?
I was going to say that discussion on the restriction of liberties under the First Amendment has been revived recently, and now they're talking about guarding against any media outlets, especially ones online, because there's been a lot of independent sources that have been available online, and a lot of people have moved away from mainstream media to the independent sources. So, for example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the representative, the infamous representative, she basically said that they need to produce a bill which will basically censor any media outlet at all, whatever it is, whether it's YouTube or even a private website, if they're spreading what they consider misinformation, which is conspiracy theory. Same couple different words, but the same overall gist of what Chuck Schumer was saying in the 90s.
Absolutely, Cody. And what these people fail to understand is that they're not fighting against people. As John Wycliffe said when he had his first stroke and almost died, the papacy came with their friars and monks. They came to his bedside expecting a retraction, expecting an apology from John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe asked to be raised in his bed, and he looked at those men and he said, "Do you think you are fighting against a man on the brink of eternity?" John Wycliffe said, "You are fighting against the truth, and the truth will overcome you." So friends, as Charles Schumer and this woman Cortez within the government of the United States, as they seek to destroy liberty in America, they are warring against the God of heaven. And the God of heaven will intervene. One other time, would Hegel be used again? It was used in 2001, September 11, 2001. What was the issue? What was the problem? Well, the leader of Afghanistan had decided he was no longer going to grow poppies to make heroin. And the CIA and the Vatican and the Mafia, they were all involved in this. And they had to stop the Afghan leader. So what did they do? They created 9/11. Created 9/11. The Vatican, Avril Manhattan's book, The Dollar in the Vatican condemned the Declaration of Independence as wickedness, called the Constitution of the United States a satanic document. So Rome and the Jesuits hate the Protestant West, and they wanted to destroy constitutional liberty. They also wanted to get rid of fundamental Islam, and they wanted to use 9/11 as a pretext to invade Afghanistan, to topple the Afghan leader, and to regain control of the Helmand Valley in Afghanistan so they could continue making their trillions of dollars off of the drugs in that region. Well, the major focus in the United States after September 11th, notice the Orlando Sentinel, September 12, 2001. Experts say there's much work to be done. It will involve much more spending and planning, hardening of key facilities, and perhaps higher taxes and forfeiture of some personal freedoms. The United States faces a new war against uncertain and hidden enemies. The temptation to sacrifice our freedom in the hopes of protecting ourselves from harm is powerful. We're faced with real threats to national security. Wait a minute. September 11 was created by the highest ranking officials in the United States government. They gave the message for the fighter jets as the planes came closer and closer to New York City. They told the fighter jets to stand down, to let those planes hit into those buildings. Why? They wanted to destroy liberty, and they wanted to have a pretext to go into Afghanistan to regain control of the poppy fields. The threat to national security was coming from within, not from without. The challenge is to meet those threats without endangering our constitutional character or undermining the freedom and liberty that are the source of our power. All those statements were within, September 12, September 13, September 12th. It's all about, in America, prepping the American mind, give up your liberty. So friends, the Hegelian dialectic at work again. You create a problem, and while everybody's focused on the problem, you bring in the destruction of liberty. Cody?
What's important to remember, too, is they had those fighter jets stand down so that those planes could hit those buildings and destroy how many people's lives? How many Americans died? How many Catholics died in that building? How many people that were Muslims died in that building? You see, the thing that all of us needs to remember is that, as you said earlier, they look at us as cattle. And even if we're on their side, they don't care, because the ends justify the means. So they'll destroy their own people. They'll destroy their own followers to get what they want in the end. That the church might be the winner in the end of all of it.
Absolutely, Cody. Absolutely. The ultimate goal is the reestablishment, the regaining of political power by the Vatican to control and rule the world one final time. That's what it's all about. From USA Today, November 26, 2001, a couple of months after 9/11, lawmakers, it said, upset with some of the administration's anti-terrorism actions, will question Attorney General John Ashcroft on the matter. Certain congressmen say the administration's actions have gone too far in infringing on civil liberties. The new Patriot Act, it was a gutting of liberty in America. In the same paper, on the same day, there's a cartoon of two children decorating a Christmas tree, and one sings, "He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. The other child says, enough about Attorney General Ashcroft already. Folk, this silly little cartoon in the November 26, 2001 USA Today says it all. That's what was going on after 9/11. In America, it was infringing on personal freedom. And it was used to create a terror attack. And while everybody was focused there, liberty was being wiped away. Friends, make no mistake, the same thing is happening today. The new Patriot Act enhances the ability of federal authorities to tap phones, share intelligence information, track internet usage, emails, and cell phones, and protect U.S. borders. This is a nice little addition that makes everybody feel good about the new Patriot Act, when in actuality, the new Patriot Act is an assault on our freedom as Americans. That's all that it really was. So, the Hegelian dialectic has been used again and again and again. Hitler in the Reichstag, Diem in South Vietnam, Clinton in Oklahoma City, Bush in the World Trade Center. 70 years, friend, separate these people on 3 different continents. Is there a common denominator? What do all of these have in common? Well, the common denominator is that this is emanating from the Vatican. And the Vatican, the Jesuits, have been the masterminds of all of these tragedies, of all of the killing of innocent people, as Cody said just a moment ago. Whether it's Roman Catholics, Muslims, communists, liberty-loving people, doesn't matter. All that matters is reaching your ultimate goal. And so the papacy, as the Bible tells us in Revelation 17:18, the woman which you saw is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. The papacy reigns over, controls the political leaders of nations, be it dictators, presidents, chancellors. And the Western Watchman over a century ago, priest Phelan declared, the Pope is the ruler of the world, all the emperors, all the kings, all the princes, all the presidents of the world are as these altar boys of mine. Friend, quite frankly, I can only think of one man in the last 100 years that bucked this system. And he died in Dealey Plaza, November 22, 1963. John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy. Catholic John F. Kennedy. Hegel's plan has been used so many times to take away liberty. The final assault on liberty will be a Sunday law across the world. What will be used to bring it about? Well, it's obvious, friend, what will be used. Chaos of some sort. Tragedy. Many people will die, innocent people. There will be bloodshed. some terrible event will kick the clock, and Sunday laws will be the result. Well, how about today, as we wrap up this talk? We have a few more slides. But what about today? What do we see going on as we are here this morning on this Sabbath of January 16, 2021? What do we see in America today? Well, we see chaos, don't we? We see angry people. We see division that is so thick, you're going to need a machete or you're going to need a cleaver to cut it. It's so thick with confusion and division. What's the point of all that? Well, the left say that Biden won fair and square and that he's going to be inaugurated this coming week. Could very well happen. The right says that Trump lost illegally and the military knows this and will step in to keep him in office. Now that's what the alternative media is telling us. So we have chaos. We have confusion with the very likely result of bloodshed, trauma, tragedy, and death across this nation. This is confusion, this is chaos, and we have a classic Hegelian dialectic. This is a classic. The Jesuits have played their cards. They have two men, Biden and Trump, from two opposite poles, and people say, oh, well, they can't control, they either control one. No, wait a minute, friends. The Jesuits always control both sides. They always control both sides. And since the founding of the CFR in the early 1920s, the Jesuits determined that they would gain control of both political parties. We have a classic Hegelian dialectic, two apparent groups, totally at odds with one another, with a possible war brewing. We have the thesis, we have the antithesis. We have capitalism on one side, we have socialism on the other side. Clashing with one another. What will be the fallout? What will be the result? We don't know. I don't know. You don't know. A solution waits in the dark. We don't know what the solution will be yet, do we? We know it will be connected with the removal of freedom for American citizens. That we know. Cody?
I was going to say, the only things that we know for sure is that a Sunday law will come and that there will be a destruction of the Constitution of this country and that there will be a total and utter destruction of liberty of conscience in this country and then in the entire world.
That we know, Cody. That we know. We've learned it from Diem, Hitler, Clinton, Bush, and now we're about to see the final hurrah. Martial law? Could be. Sunday law? Could be. A peaceful passing of power? That could be. Someone is in charge still. And I'm thankful today. I'm thankful today that in all this chaos, in all this confusion, somebody hasn't moved. Somebody hasn't changed. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 26. In an oppressive climate, as Babylon the Great ruled in the days of Ezekiel. Ezekiel had a vision in Ezekiel chapter 1. He says, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. There's the throne of God, unmovable, unchangeable, constant. We can trust in that. In Ezekiel chapter 1, and we will close with the next slide. In Ezekiel chapter 1, things looked very confusing, very chaotic. Fifth Testimonies, page 752 and 753, talks about this confusion and chaos. There were wheels within wheels, Ezekiel chapter 1 says, in an arrangement so complicated that at first sight they appeared to Ezekiel to be all in confusion. Does that describe this world today? Does that describe America? Everything going on in America today, it's wheels within wheels. You don't know where one wheel ends and where another wheel begins. Very confusing. But when they moved, it was with beautiful exactness and in perfect harmony. Heavenly beings were impelling these wheels, and above all, upon the glorious sapphire throne was the Eternal One, while round about the throne was the encircling rainbow, emblem of grace and love. Overpowered by the terrible glory of the scene, Ezekiel fell upon his face when a voice bade him arise and hear the word of the Lord. Then there was given him a message of warning for Israel. The wheel-like complications that appeared to the prophet to be involved in such confusion were under the guidance of an infinite hand. The Spirit of God revealed to him as moving and directing these wheels brought harmony out of confusion. The whole world was under his control. Myriads of glorified beings were ready at his word to overrule the power and policy of evil men and bring good to his faithful ones. And I'm thankful today that above and beyond the chaos and confusion that Rome has created in America, above and beyond that, the God of heaven sits on his throne today. We can trust him. We can count on him because he is still the unchangeable, all-knowing, all-loving one.